Cow Behind the Barn, a podcast exploring humanity, the world, and the divine as experienced and interpreted by an artist. I'm Kevin Caldwell, a co-founder of the Table Collective. Episode 10, and time to put the cards on the table. What's the nature of the world we live in? And by the time we close this episode, what does Kevin think about all that? It was episode 2 when I first asked, where and when did I begin? Thinking I was just going to be introducing myself and having no idea that it would take me 9 episodes just to probe the nature of where in that question. Am I done now? Do I have it all figured out? Of course not. In fact, I, in some ways, have more questions now than when I began. My way of understanding what where means is now shaped by and entangled with, pun intended, quantum theories about the world and with how some of the world's religious heritages have imagined the nature of the universe. Those voices have affected my inner being and how I engage with my memories of the places I've lived and the people that I have lived there with. As such, my poetic and musical art have been affected. I've created new work and I've experienced older pieces in new ways as a result of all this. Episode by episode, I've allowed my past and my art to speak. I've given voice as well to the Bhagavad Gita, the Buddha, Lao Tzu, the Book of Genesis, the Gospel of John, the Quran, and quantum physics. And today I'm recording the episode in which I will try to summarize what all those voices are saying and what I think about what where means when I ask where and when did I begin. Of course, as I ask that, implicitly, I'm asking it about you as well, and about the trees that line the street where I'm staying as I record this episode, and about the air I breathe and the people who came before me, before us, and the people in countries where the events of today's news are taking place, etc. If you've listened to even a few of the episodes, you know that although I've tried to stay focused on where and on the nature of the world we live in, many times I've brought in things related to the when or time aspect or the I and consciousness ingredients of that where and when did I begin question. More times than I can count, I've added a comment like, we'll come back to that. And then I quickly get back to the where or place and space element. In this episode, I really do plan to try, once again, to focus just on questions related to matter, to the stuff making up our universe. I mean, that question alone is plenty complex. All the questions in that question have sub-questions. What is it? Well, what's it made of? Is it real? And yes, that's a serious question. And in what ways is it real? Does each thing exist on its own? Is everything interconnected? Is this the only world, the only where? Are there other wheres? And if so, are they like this one? How has this world or worlds come about? How did it or these get here and whatever they is or are? I think of the religious heritages and quantum physics for this episode like guests that I've invited for a meal. And I'm imagining us all seated at the table now, and hence the episode title. We and they have listened to each other through all these prior episodes. The main courses have been served. We've pushed away the dishes, and we're settling in for after-dinner drinks. My guests are looking at me, the host, to guide the remainder of the conversation. So I turn to the most recent guest, and I ask quantum physics, "Quantum, sir, tell me about the world. What is it? Is there more than one, and how did it get here?" My leading questions. Quantum clears their throat and begins, "Well, matter is composed of elementary particles known as quarks and leptons, particles that include electrons. Quarks combine into protons and neutrons, and along with electrons form atoms. Atoms combine into molecules. Large groups of molecules form most of the matter of everyday life." I notice here that the eyes of my other guests are beginning to glaze a bit, so I feel like I need to do something. Quantum, thank you. Great start. What is something else about matter that we should know? Well, another way to describe the world is that everything is made up of mass and energy, and mass can be converted into energy, and quantum scans the room. The mention of energy has actually captured some attention. Mass is not necessarily what you think, he continues. Those elementary particles I mentioned, which make up mass, they behave like tiny isolated balls and at the same time act like waves. Well, and this is interesting, she says. Notice I'm trying to keep pronouns moving around. This is interesting. None of those things, the matter and mass and energy of our daily life, is what that thing is until that thing is experienced, like when one of us measures it or sees it, touches it. And I know that's not how we experience things. I mean, they seem like they just are, right? But this is how things work. Nothing exists independently of being observed and experienced by you and I. Now I notice the Buddha and the Gita are nodding in agreement. But I don't just mean that each specific thing, its particles, etc., is tangled with those who observe them and experience them. These particles are also entangled with other particles. They affect each other in ways we don't understand. Not just those that are nearby to each other, but those separated by vast distances as well. Reality is a vast entanglement of mass and energy, operating like particles, but also like waves, all at the same time. I intervene here and ask, well, this is a great start. Are there other worlds, and do they act in the same way? Quantum replies, the implications of current quantum theories suggest the strong possibility, some physicists would even say necessity, that other universes exist and or existed. There could be a whole series of universes, like a chain, simultaneous universes, like bubbles or pockets alongside this one. At the same time, it's very likely that those different worlds would have very different laws of physics, and so would act differently. I interrupt again. How did this all begin? With what we physicists like to call a Big Bang. Of course, nothing actually went bang. There could not have been sound. We also think that there could have been a series of bangs, which raises the question, of course, what was there before that? Was there anything before a first bang? Was there a first bang? I interrupt quantum at this point, asking questions about what was before the bang, implies time, and I've promised not to bring that up yet. After a quick apology, Quantum agrees that they have covered what they have to say about the questions I have posed, and so I decide to continue with the other guests. I'm going to start with those of you who usually get labeled as Eastern, and then I'll turn to the so-called Western guests. I turn to the Gita. What do you think about all this? Well, when quantum speaks of particles and mass and energy, that seems to me like another language for the way that all the many elements of nature manifest energy. Now, I say it's a manifestation of divine energy, of Krishna's energy, which is a way of saying Vishnu's energy, but this world is full of energy. And it's that energy that we could say is what I think quantum is talking about. Maybe we're talking about the same thing. Maybe quantum is talking about divine energy without realizing it. Also, I agree about multiple worlds. There have been and will be innumerable cycles of worlds, beginning and ending, and yes, universes upon universes. But what was before these cycles? The material world is all an expression of divine energy, in my way of thinking, and that's an energy that has no beginning. There's no such thing as before the divine energy. It's always been. Well, I want to be sure that Buddha gets to speak here because I think Buddha's views are going to relate closely. So I ask, what are your views on all this? Well, thank you. Quantum did say that nothing exists independently of being observed. And I immediately thought to myself, we're saying something very much the same. So what is the world? I say we don't know and can't know if what we're asking is, what is it apart from our own perceptions of it? It exists, but it does not exist apart from our experiences and our perceptions. Gita has said that what is real is that everything's an expression of divine energy. Now, I'm very aware that my ideas about the divine are often misunderstood. My own followers have many different ideas of what I've taught about that. I know our host wants us to discuss some of these things later, so for now, I'll just say that nothing is created and then exists as something independent. And since every action results from other actions, I say that an action of creation by a divine being would also be connected to other actions and so cannot be an independent act. There was no bang, no creation independently of other factors. If I understand correctly, Gita would actually agree with me here because in Gita's view, matter does not exist independently. Now, I'm not saying we agree about the divine in how Gita sees that, but we agree about everything being connected, or in Quantum's and now Kevin's word, entangled. Thank you, I interject. I want to hold the idea of the divine for the sessions when we talk about consciousness. Yes, of course, Kevin, I agree. So let me shift to topics, other topics here, and add that at the table we have discussed multiple universes. And I see no reason to think that there aren't many other universes. Maybe they're in a chain, maybe one after the other, maybe they're all at once. But speculation about such questions serves actually no practical purpose in ending suffering, which is my whole focus. So I'm not really interested in those questions. I don't think we can know the answers to them anyway. How did things come about? As I said above, everything is caused by other things. Nothing happens independently from other events. This seems very consistent with what Quantum and the Gita are both saying, though we're using different words. So again, there's no beginning of everything, no first cause, no bang, no creation in my view. Not if one defines them as events or actions independent from other events or actions. I really can't say anything more specifically about how it all came to be than that. And I don't think we can know. I turn to the table and I say, well, I think Tao Te Ching is next in line. Thank you. Sometimes the most important thing said is the thing not said. However, since I have been asked to speak, I'll say a few words. The world and everything in it, all the actions that take place in it, is all determined by the creative generative process which I call the Tao. Some would say that this is ultimate reality. And I guess I agree, but what I'm saying is that reality is process, not a process, but reality is process itself, or process is what is real. Maybe this is what others are saying too, with different words. Is there more than one world? Well, since the Tao, or process, gave rise to many different things in this world, it does seem natural to me to assume that the Tao also gave rise to many worlds. They're just more things in some ways. That also answers how it all came to be, at least in my view. The process, the Tao, is how everything happens. Everything comes to be. It's how everything changes. The ongoing generative creative process is the origin of everything and continues to shape everything. Process is the what and also the how. Now, I know there's more to say, Kevin interjects, but to keep the conversation moving, I now suggest that Genesis proceed. Well, I know that Kevin doesn't want us to talk about the divine yet, but that is sort of my starting point. But leaving that out for the moment, I'll say this. I think about the universe in two ways. On the one hand, I say it is the earth and the heavens, and second, I say that it was crafted, shaped in the beginning. Let me start from that second one. I use the word crafted, shaped from, carved from, and it's a word that implies that there was material prior to the crafting, something to craft from. So what were the earth and the heavens crafted from? Was there mass and energy already existing, to use Quantum's terms, and then the earth and the heavens as we know them were crafted? It may seem strange to hear me ask, because after all, I'm the one who said in the beginning, right? But at the time, I wasn't thinking about the questions the way I am now as I listened to the others. I didn't think of beginning in the same way that others are talking about it. There's a number of comments around the table here. this is Kevin interjecting again, there's a number of comments around the table as if everybody is kind of nodding here, the same here to that observation by Genesis, that we're thinking about things together in new ways as we listen to one another. What of my statement about earth and heavens? Genesis poses. Heavens, plural. I suppose when I say heavens, plural, it suggests other worlds, doesn't it? How many heavens were there or are there? But this is something else that I really wasn't thinking about until our conversation. I have to suppose, however, that there may well have been other heavens and other worlds. Now, as to how the world came to be, my answer would need to bring in the divine. So is it okay if I just say something here, Kevin? I motion with my hand to continue, and I say, I think a brief comment is probably fitting here. Well, I simply say, God made it. And no matter how many universes there may be, I would say that God made those. Whatever it was that this earth and all the heavens were crafted from, well, then God made that too. So I'll stop there for now. Thank you, I say. Anything else, though, on the nature of the world that you want to say? Well, thank you for asking. There is something else. I wasn't sure if I should bring this up. I do say that after heavens and earth were crafted from something, the next result of what I guess Tao Te Ching would say was the creative process, and I would call divine creative action and speech, was light. I said it, but I have to admit it's mysterious. I said light came before planets and sun and moon. I don't fully understand what it means for light to exist if it can't be seen. Here, Genesis paused and then continued. Like I said, I haven't thought about some of these things before our conversation, everybody. I'm wondering, though, could the primordial light that I speak of be akin, perhaps, to the energy mentioned by Gita and quantum, meaning that it emerges somehow from energy or mass that quantum speaks about? Though I use the language of divine crafting and speaking, and Gita uses language of manifesting divine energy. It also seems similar to what the Tao Te Ching is calling the creative generative process, though for me the process unfolds through divine actions and divine speech. I just need to think about these things more. I comment, well, that's probably true for all of us. Everybody's nodding in agreement, and I turn next to John and motion for him to begin. I can't really answer the question about what the world is without, like Genesis, saying something about my views of the divine. So could I actually begin there very briefly, Kevin? And I answer, well, Genesis and the Gita and the Buddha have all touched this topic, so yes, please proceed. Okay, well, bear with me for a moment. Many years ago, I wrote that the divine is ultimately towardsness. The nature of the divine is to lean towards and to be attentive. The words I used then were, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, which was the Word that was towards God. Or maybe to put it in a briefer way, God is towards God's self. So I understand this is what reality is, that this is how I see it. It is towardsness, just as the Tao Te Ching says it is process. I say ultimate reality is towardsness. I then went on to say that everything in the world, all things and all beings, came to be in that divine reality that is towardsness. So how do I answer the question about what the world is? Well, it too shares in that quality of towardsness. To exist, to be, means to be towards other things, towards other people, towards ourselves, to live in accord with the towardsness that is the quality or nature of ultimate reality. As such, I think I might be saying something close to quantum's description of entanglement when I say everything is in the divine as I see it, and responding to and towards is part of our nature, or the nature of everything. Maybe something similar to the Tao Te Ching's idea that life is fullest when we live in harmony with what Tao Te Ching calls the Tao, the way that things are, in accord with reality, in other words. Now, as to the questions about how the world began and whether there's many or just one, I assumed it was crafted and spoken into being by God, like Genesis. After all, that was one of my resources. But beyond that, those are not really questions I was thinking about at the time. Um, I am now, in light of our conversations. I step in. Well, since time is getting short, and okay, no jokes about talking about time, everybody, I want the Quran to have a chance to speak. Well, thank you. I'm listening very carefully, and my last thought is that I too have a hard time knowing where to start without mentioning my way of understanding the divine. But since our host is asking us to hold that topic back, I'll just affirm what Genesis said, that God made everything that is. But what is it that results from that? And that's fascinating. I'm very curious to talk more with Quantum, the scientists. I'm a poem. And in keeping with poetry, I use metaphor and imagery, including when I say that everything is made from water, for example. It could be that this is my way of speaking about what quantum sees as the foundational waves and particles making up the mass and energy of everything. We need to have a talk about that, Quantum. Another way for me of answering the question about what the world is that I've said that everything is a sign. I mean signs of the divine, of course. But that means that everything we see is not exactly what we think we're seeing, or at least is not only what we perceive. It's a sign of something else. I would love to discuss this more with the Buddha about how perceptions of what we see are not exactly what really is. And you as well, Gita, and your ideas about divine energy being manifest in everything, because I have ideas about that as well related to the nature of light. But for now, I say that everything is still expanding, and so it's changing, which makes me think we're all in different ways here at the table, suggesting that there's some sort of ongoing process shaping the world as we know it. Now, we've asked how many universes. I agree fully with Quantum and Gita and Buddha about the fact that there are many universes and many worlds. I said so. I said that God was Lord of all the worlds. There is another topic that was mentioned in passing in our conversations. The idea implied when we speak of other worlds coming and going, for example. Gita, you mentioned this. And that means that worlds end. This wasn't a question that our host posed for us. I actually talk a lot about the end of things and a final day, a final event. We probably all have different ideas for what happens after whatever ending we understand. And if there are many worlds, perhaps a final day such as I talk about is the final day for the world that it refers to. But since Kevin didn't ask, I won't say more. I notice that it's starting to get late, so I thank all my guests and I send them home with the refrain from my podcast, "We'll come back to this again." And now at the table, it's just you and I, listener. So how do I answer the questions my guests were addressing? Tell me about the world. What is it? Is there more than one? And how did it get here? You may have had a sense in the words of the different guests as I've quoted them that there were times when Kevin was actually speaking, as I tried to imagine how they might have reflected on areas where they agreed or disagreed with each other, and that's pretty true, I admit it. But here's a more explicit summary. To the question, tell me about the world, what is it? Well, first, the world is in constant change. It is the very nature of reality to change. One way I see reality is that it's an emerging generative process, like the Tao, and that energy is a fitting word to describe it, like Gita and quantum, I suppose. But it's clear that energy involves connections between things. And so I also believe that things are not just things. Nothing exists in an isolated, quarantined state, so to speak. And much of my poetry and music explores this, but I'm seeing it in deeper ways. In some cases, in my art, I was intuitively seeing this reality before I understood it and long before I began this podcast. We are all, everything is, entangled in at least three ways, or perhaps these three are all the same, just talked about differently. First, there's an entanglement in quantum's way of describing it that has to do with the nature of particles and how they respond under certain conditions and how they act as if they're not predetermined to act in certain ways, almost as if they have minds of their own. Second, Our perceptions and experience entangle us with what we perceive and experience. We're not separate from what we experience. What we experience is not separate from us. We mutually affect each other. We're not existing in isolation from other perceivers and experiencers, nor from the activity of particles mentioned under my first point. It's all entangled. And third, another way I believe is fitting to describe entanglement is to use the word that I coined based on John, towardsness. Things are entangled, and particles behave the way quantum says they do, and the generative process happens as it does, and energy is manifested as it is, because towardsness is in the very nature of everything. We're all wrapped up in everything and each other. All right, tell me about the world. Is there more than one? It seems to me that the overwhelmingly harmonious refrain sung at the table was either a resounding yes to that question, there's more, or affirmations of the very strong possibility. There are multiple universes, in sequence and or all at once. I can't help but agree with that. Well, and then to the third question, tell me about the world, how did it get here? The views at the table have ranged from the world emerges constantly and always has and always will, to it began at some definite point, a bang or a word or an act of creation. It seems that these two views call for a choice. In other words, either a sequence of endings and beginnings stretching backwards and forwards into endless, invisible mists, or the idea that there had to have been, at some point, some first beginning that set all this in motion. In general, the so-called East and West each line up on different sides, as it were, on this topic. The challenge is that my answer as to which side I take requires me to have a theory about time. Without getting into that topic, I'll just say this, maybe as a teaser. I think they're both right. But trying to explain how they're both right and why I view that would take me deep into the questions of time and consciousness, which means this seems like a good point to start to wrap things up. Before I do that, I want to set up a closing act of meditation for this section. For me, none of this is merely theoretical. If I'm entangled with people and things in the ways that I believe to be true, then my actions and thoughts and intentions all affect the things and people and beings in the universe, and vice versa. Being entangled affects relationships, how I see and treat people. Being entangled affects my relationship with things, how I see and treat the environment, for example. And so as I prepare to end, I'm going to go back to my first episode. I'm going to use it as a way of sort of wrapping up this whole section, because ever since episode 2, I have been trying to probe and understand and explore the nature of the where, the what of our world. And so, as I prepare to end, I'm going back to the first episode, to the song I used to explain why I'm creating a podcast, even if there may be nobody who listens to it. And that song was really trying to express the premise that what we do and intend and think affects other things. But that song, Butterfly Wing, now has new depths for me, new echoes and resonances, because now I hear it with the harmonies from the voice of Gita, Buddha, Lao Tzu, Genesis, John, the Quran, and quantum physics. It means, and I'm using that word as a verb here, it means differently now. And I mean it differently. In a way, I use it differently, the song. When I sing that song live or hear my recording of it, I form intentions to move wings of compassion towards people or events or headlines, at the environment, the world I'm in, at pollution, at war, at pain and suffering, at myself, and here and now in a way that I don't understand fully. I quote unquote aim it at you, or perhaps softer, I offer it to you, send it to you, for you. May you receive the compassionate psychic winds of my tiny butterfly wings in the song Butterfly Wing. They say that all it takes is the wing of just one butterfly to change the course of time in a broken life, a million miles away, million miles away, million miles away. Million miles away. They say that all it takes is just one gentle whispered word, and though it not be heard, it can still do its work. A million miles away, a million miles away, a million miles away. Million miles away. Shadows fall around like acid rain, soak into our souls and leave bitter stains, pouring out from inside hearts long shattered. Can my tiny soul do anything that could matter? From a million miles away, a million miles away, a million miles away, a million miles away. They say that all it takes is the wing of just one butterfly to change the course of time in a broken life. They say that all it takes is just one gentle whispered word, though it not be heard, it can still do its work. A million miles away, a million miles away, a million miles away. Million miles away, million miles away, million miles away, million miles away. They say that all it takes is the wing of just one butterfly. When I began to create this episode, I thought that I would transition to begin looking at time in the next one. But as I was getting ready to record it, I had the idea of doing an episode that draws from some of the music and poetry I've been weaving into every session, and create an episode that was almost completely just poetry and instrumental music and songs selected to portray an artist's way of expressing the things that my narration has been trying to describe and clarify. So that's what's going to come next as a way of wrapping up my focus on the nature of the world, the where in which we all live. Until next time.